Our presenter for this morning and three successive sessions is Reverend Wendell Karsen. Wendell served as a Reformed Church in America pastor, serving two parishes in Michigan as a missionary in Taiwan, Hong Kong, Indonesia, and Thailand, as well as a professor at Western Theological Seminary. He has written 14 books, numerous articles. He holds degrees from Wheaton College, a Bachelor's of Science, Fuller Theological Seminary, a Bachelor of Divinity, and from Western Theological Seminary, his Master's of Theology. So please join me in welcoming Wendell Karsen.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be here and be back in Holland. We now live in a retirement community in Florida called the Penny Farms, the Penny Retirement Community, founded by J.C. Penny. Next year will be 100 years ago. So it's a caring, sharing, serving community. And if some of you are looking for that kind of place to go, I'm doing an ad right now to invite you to come to sunny Northeast Florida. It doesn't get too hot there compared to the rest. But it's always a privilege to be at HASP. I've been here decades ago, and now after many years coming back to share with you this morning on Taiwan. And next week we'll talk about China. The week after that about, next week about Hong Kong. The week after that about China. And then after that about Indonesia. Confucius said, and you all know this, a picture is worth 1,000 words. We preachers kind of are intimidated by that because people say that most people remember about 10% of any sermon that a preacher gives. So this morning, I'm not going to give you a sermon. I'm going to give you an illustrated lecture so you can kind of see for yourselves what we're talking about. So do we leave the lights on or do we shut them off? Where you're fine, you can see it okay, all right. So prospect and retrospect and prospect, faith and politics in Asia. Retrospect is very important because as we go through the history of Taiwan, you'll see why it has a very big impact on what's going on today for Taiwan. So Taiwan, oh no, I've got two pictures up here, okay. Taiwan is 90 miles off the coast of China. And it doesn't only include Taiwan, the larger island, but also you can see Quemoy here right in the mouth of Xiamen Harbor, or Amoy as we used to call it. And then the Matsao group of islands right over there. There's one over here, and then the Pescadore Islands over here, and Lo Yu, Lan Yu, we say in Taiwanese. So it's not just Taiwan itself in terms of that one island, but it's a group of islands and some right in the corner of China. It's 280 miles long, the main island, and 80 miles wide. And the capital is Taipei in the north, way up there, and Tainan in the south, over here, was the ancient capital of Taiwan before. And we'll take a look at that. Taiwan, in terms of religion, Buddhists 35%, Taoists 33%, Christians almost 4%, and no religious background significantly 18.2%. That's a lot of people who don't believe in anything. So the Christian church in Taiwan has a real task, not only in terms of reaching out to the indigenous faith people, but to younger people actually more who are not religious at all. So in 13,000 BC, Taiwan was first occupied, the archaeologists tell us, by Austronesians, people from the islands around Australia and so on. So that's a long way back. Notice they're not Chinese. There are now 16 tribes in Taiwan, which is 3% of the population. It's the story of the Native Americans or the native whoever's anywhere. They had the whole island of Taiwan, but when the Chinese first started to come, they were driven off the plains, which was the good farmland and so on, up into the mountains, and have been there ever since. Now, of course, things are different, but so they had some fishing villages and so on in Taiwan. But so Taiwan has a long history. The Portuguese came to Taiwan in 1544, and they actually did not land, but they used to sail by the island. It was such a beautiful island that they always would exclaim, Ilha Formosa. In Portuguese, that means beautiful island. And that's how Taiwan got its first name, actually, Formosa. It was known as Formosa for a very long, long time. And that's the Portuguese name for it. Taiwan in Chinese means dais in the middle of the sea. So it's like a beautiful island in the middle of the sea. So in 1616, Japan invaded Taiwan. They tried to, but they were thwarted by a typhoon, and only one of their ships landed, and the Aboriginals slaughtered all of those soldiers. So the Japanese tried to take it already in 1616, but the Taiwanese defeated them. Then the Dutch came in 1604 to Taiwan. They first went to the Pescadore Islands, which I had pointed out to you in 1622. They took that as well. And their oversight was reportedly so severe and the rations so short that 1,300 of the 1,500 Chinese enslaved there died in the process of the construction of the base and fort in 1624 of the Dutch in South Taiwan. And this is what the base and the fort looked like at that time. So as we'll see, particularly with the Dutch East Indies, which is now Indonesia, the record of many of our ancestors in Asia is not very good. In 1624, they built Fort Zeelandia, which you see there. And but they did bring some padres with them. In 1627, George Candidius, he was the first missionary to Taiwan. He lived amongst the tribal peoples, and some of them became Christians. And in 1629, Robert Junius established a rudimentary education system. He founded 40 schools amongst the Taiwanese Aboriginals and a healthcare system, as well as innovations in agriculture. Arnoldus Weissemus was among 40 Dutch pastors who came with the colonists to Taiwan. And under his ministry, there were 5,000 converts amongst the Aboriginal peoples. And he also began then work amongst Chinese immigrants. By that time, some Chinese had started to come over from China to Taiwan. Then in 1626, now just remember how many invasions and all of this are going on, okay? This is why this is important for us today when we come to what's going on today. 1626, the Spanish invaded the North Taiwan. And actually the fort, Santo Domingo, they built in 1628, it's still there to this day. It eventually became the British Embassy in Taiwan. It's located in Tamsui, which is the suburb of Taipei. And you can still visit that today if you go to Taiwan. In 1642, the Dutch ousted the Spanish and began their control of the whole island of Taiwan. And here you can see some of the Chinese at that time who were called the Compradores because they cooperated with the Dutch. And Fort Providencia, it was built in 1653, and that is in Tainan, which I pointed out was the southern capital of Taiwan under the Dutch and subsequently. But then in 1661, Cheng Kong, or in the West known as Kaksenga, he invaded Taiwan. Now his mother was Chinese, his father was Japanese, and he raised he was a pirate originally. He raised a big force and tried to defend the last of the Ming dynasty because the Manchus from the north were invading China, and trying to drive out the last of the Ming dynasty. And this man tried to help them hang on to the south of China, but eventually lost and retreated to Taiwan and defeated the Dutch there. In 1622, he defeated the Dutch and established the Kingdom of Dongning on Taiwan. So there was an independent kingdom there at that time. And you can see in this old photograph the surrender of the Dutch. So you can put your hand over your heart and weep for the Dutch. Anyway, this is something you can still visit today. And it shows the surrender of the Dutch. You see the guy on the right with his head bent over, that's Dutch, and he's submitting to the Kaksenga at that point. The Christians amongst the Aboriginals were all slaughtered and dispersed during his reign. And then in 1664 to 68, 4-year period, the Dutch allied with the Qing dynasty and took Keelung and tried to retake Taiwan. Keelung is in the north of the island near Taipei, and they were hoping to go down and retake the whole of Taiwan, but they were not successful. In 1683, the Qing completely defeated the Ming and conquered Taiwan. So they, by saying conquered Taiwan, it meant they sent a few officials there and declared a prefecture, not a province of China. And they controlled a very, very small area and not that many people at that time. In 1684, Taiwan was declared the prefecture, and the Qing had just very loose control, as I said. Then the Chinese people began to pour into Taiwan. Why did they go to Taiwan? To escape chaos and war on the mainland and to have a better chance in terms of economic life. So they didn't come to Taiwan just to take it over, but they came there as immigrants to have a better life there. So during this time, the Taiwanese on the island, the Aboriginals and the early Chinese staged 11 rebellions in 100 years against the Chinese mainland people. 11 rebellions in 100 years. Then in 1868, there was the British Camphor War over camphor, which was a desirable product. And they occupied Anping near Taiwan, which is where the Dutch fort used to be. That's all they ever did there. But again, you had this incursion by a foreign power. In 1874, the Japanese sent a punitive expedition to Taiwan. There had been one of their ships had gone aground near Taiwan, and their people on the ship had been slaughtered by the Aboriginals. So they sent this expedition to pacify the Taiwanese. In 1884, the French invaded Keelung in the north. So here, again and again, many, many different occupiers, colonizers, and so on. In 1887, the Qing finally declared Taiwan to be a province of China. But by that time, even they only controlled 1/3 of the island. That's all. In 1895, you had the Sino-Japanese War, which the Chinese lost. And as a result of that, they ceded Taiwan to Japan in perpetuity. So Taiwan became a Japanese colony officially. And that'll, also I should say not just Taiwan, but the Pescadore Islands that I showed you. This was the Treaty of Shimonoseki. In 1895, there was fierce resistance by the Taiwanese to the Japanese. And they actually declared the Republic of Taiwan and issued an independence declaration. Here it is. I'll read it later if we have time. But they not only had a flag, they issued stamps. I actually have them. I am a stamp collector. And so they actually declared their independence. But the Japanese invaded Taiwan and they smashed the Republic of Taiwan and took it over again. They built this presidential palace, which if you go to Taipei, you can still see today. Kind of a little funny story about that. On the emperor's birthday, they used to compel all the school children and everybody to come to this huge square, maybe 10,000 people, wave Japanese flags and say, "Long live the emperor." So the Japanese soldiers would be there surrounding them, and so everybody needed to bow and say, "Bansai, Bansai, Bansai." Means may the emperor live 10,000 years. But the Taiwanese would scream at the top of their lungs, "Bang Shai, Bang Shai," which means shit on the emperor. But of course, nobody knew what they were doing. Now, what about the church? Well, we talked about the early Christians way back amongst the Aborigines under the Dutch, but the Taiwan Kitokino Kaohe, which means Taiwan Christian Presbyterian Church, had its roots all the way back to 1865. The man on the top right, you see, with the glasses on, was James Maxwell. He was an English missionary doctor, and he came to Taiwan in 1865 and stayed till 1873. He established the Xinlao Hospital in Kaohsiung, which today is a major hospital, as you can see in this book that commemorated the 100th anniversary, maybe 150, in Kaohsiung, which is in the south of Taiwan. This was the Taiping Jing Christian Church, and now called Maxwell Memorial Church in Kaohsiung. Maxwell, as a medical doctor, missionary, planted 22 churches. And by 1872, the time he left, and he translated the New Testament into Taiwanese. He is now memorialized there in this memorial, which if you go to Kaohsiung, you can still see it. And he's on a stamp of the Republic of China. Don't forget, Taiwan's called Republic of China. China is called People's Republic, PRC, ROC, different. But notice on this stamp at the bottom, what does it say? Well, you can't read the Chinese. Maybe some of you can, I don't know. Republic of China, then what? Taiwan. That's pretty new. And we'll see how that came about. Anyway, in the north, a Canadian Presbyterian pastor by the name of George Mackay landed in North Taiwan at Tam Shui, just outside of Taipei in 1872. So Maxwell was in the south, and Mackay came to the north. Nothing there, no language school, no Bibles, no churches, no clinics, no nothing. And this man was a phenomenal missionary used by the Lord. This is the first clinic that he established which you can still see if you go there to visit today. And he learned the language by going out on the hillsides and sitting with the herd boys who were keeping the buffalo and pointing to things and asking them how to say it and so on. That's how he learned the language. This is the church that is obviously a newer building than the original one, but on the site where his original church was planted. He married a Taiwanese lady who had become a Christian. And here you can see his family. And next to him is his son, who succeeded him as a missionary and educator in Taiwan, and then the grandson, actually. He would make many forays into the countryside where people had no dentists or medical help and so on. He actually pulled 20,000 teeth while he was there, if you want to believe that. You could see him to the left with the big pith helmet on. And he always had this long black beard. He was an ethnologist, a naturalist, a linguist, a photographer, and as I said, an esteemed tooth puller. He established Oxford College, which is still there today. You can visit it, the original building. Of course, now it's huge, and this is just the historical site in 1862. He established 60 churches in 30 years. So, I mean, his book is called From Far Formosa, if you ever get a chance to read it. It's like reading the book of Acts, really. It's amazing what this man did. Well, what the Lord did through him, I should say. So these are just some of the churches that, what they look like today, of course they were. And he almost got stoned once because the Taoists didn't like building a building that had a tower on it because it interfered with the feng shui, you know, the yin and the yang and all of that. And so they threw stones at him, and those stones today are embedded over the gateway to Oxford University. And then he named the three big stones faith, hope, and love in Chinese. And this is Mackay Memorial Hospital, the original building that was erected after, you know, his clinic and everything else after many years. And he died, but this whole medical ministry developed. And today, you'll see later, it's a huge hospital complex. You can visit his grave there today and his big black beard in Tam Shui, in Taiwanese, Tam Shui in Mandarin. And there is also a stamp honoring him. This was earlier, so it doesn't have Taiwan on it, but, and then this souvenir sheet, the 150 years since he came to Taiwan, put out by the Taiwanese government. Then Thomas Barclay, who was an English Presbyterian, arrived in Taiwan in 1875, and he stayed all the way till 1935. Figure it out, that's 60 years of missionary service. He founded Tainan Theological Seminary, which is in the south in Tainan, and is still there today. It's a thriving institution, and you can visit it. Well, then came back to the history, the war with Japan, the World War II, China's war with Japan. Of course, you know the story about that. Chiang Kai-shek and the nationalists fought Mao Zedong and the communists, with the communists against the Japanese. And eventually they were defeated. In 1943, Chiang Kai-shek was included at the Cairo conference with the Big Two. Stalin did not come to that. And was made some promises. Roosevelt kept thinking that the nationalists are going to be the future of Asia. He was not right. The Japanese surrendered in 1945 to the nationalists at that time. And Douglas MacArthur, who was the supreme commander in Asia at that time authorized the nationalists to send troops to Taiwan to disarm the Japanese there and temporarily take place over until the status of Taiwan could be decided in the future. So Chiang Kai-shek did not see it that way. He saw it as we're going to take it over. Well, at first, the Taiwanese were euphoric. They had been under Japan for 50 years, and although Japan had developed the island tremendously in terms of economics and infrastructure, Taipei was the first city to be electrified in the whole of Asia, for example. Railroad system, everything. They were going to use Kaohsiung in the south as the central port for the whole of the East Asia prosperity sphere. That was their plan. But were very repressive to the Taiwanese people. So these crowds turned out when these Chinese troops came thinking, we've been liberated. We've been liberated. Hallelujah. Well, the first thing Chiang Kai-shek did was appoint this guy, Chen Yi, to be the governor of Taiwan. He was as corrupt as you could be. And they even ripped up the railroad tracks, the pipes in people's houses, and took all their houses over and sold the stuff to actually the communists on the mainland. So finally, the Taiwanese had enough. And by 1947, February 28, it's called Jiji Pat in Taiwanese, February 28, because that's a significant date in their history. They rose up. And there was very little violence in the sense that not many people were killed. They kind of took over the island, and the Boy Scouts started directing traffic and all of that. And they sent word over to Chiang Kai-shek, thinking that he would respond and come and settle in this problem. Instead, he sent thousands of troops to Taiwan. They landed in Keelung in the north, and they started shooting all the way down to the south. Anybody they saw. I didn't know a Taiwanese family who didn't at least lose somebody in this thing, ancestral, when I got there. And then they did a second round to round up anybody from Boy Scout age on and up who had been directing traffic or any potential leadership, and they shot them all dead. 20 to 30,000 people perished. Many people don't even know about this, So can you see the Taiwanese? So, and here this photo actually shows them executing people with they're not armed or anything else. Their hands are tied, they're shooting them in the head. Well, you know that in 1949, Mao said, the Chinese have stood up in Beijing and announced the formation of the People's Republic of China. Chiang Kai-shek ended up really corrupt regime, terrible military policies, wasted enormous amounts of the aid that we sent to him and so on. Finally fled to Taiwan with his troops on December 10, 1949. 2 million troops landed in Taiwan and 1 million civilians. And they brought a lot of the treasures from the National Palace in Beijing to Taiwan, and plane loads of gold and all of that. So they descended on Taiwan, took everything over, declared martial law, 1949. You know how long the martial law lasted in Taiwan under the nationalists? 38 years. 1949 to 1987. This was beginning of what was known as the White Terror period. Red terror means kind of like communist, and white terror means fascist. Fascist. Now people are thinking, oh, Chiang Kai-shek and Madame Day were Christians, and so on. And Free China, it was called Free China at the time. And we had the whole of the China lobby in this country, and they sold us the bill of goods that these were Christian knights on white horses. And meanwhile, they had a terribly oppressive policies against the Taiwanese people. So Chiang Kai-shek, of course, said, well, this is our base, and from here, we're going to retake the mainland. That was his goal. Truman sent the Seventh Fleet to the Straits of Taiwan, not only to prevent the Chinese communists from invading Taiwan, but also to keep the nationalists from trying to do something foolish against the mainland. So it was sold a bill of goods that Chiang Kai-shek was their one lovely father, and so on. And but meanwhile, the Taiwanese could not even speak their own language. If the kids in school spoke Taiwanese, they were severely disciplined. The church could not dispense Taiwanese Bibles in Taiwanese language, and so on. This is the famous Green Island prison on Green Island, just off of Taiwan. Thousands of political prisoners were incarcerated there. Most of them died because they were so cold in the winter and so on. I'm not telling you about my involvement in all of that in some of this, but I was a conduit of Presbyterian funds from America to help the families of these people who the police would go around and they would find their employers. Once they arrested somebody, put them in this camp, they would find their employers and tell them to fire everybody related to this person. And so they were destitute. So the Presbyterian Church reached out to them. So 200,000 political prisoners and 20,000 executions. So this is your Chiang Kai-shek regime. In 1971, the UN admitted the People's Republic into the United Nations. The Republic of China still held its seat there. And everybody says Chiang Kai-shek ordered his representatives to walk out in protest, and they never came back, which everybody says was a huge political blunder at that time. So Taiwan has not been represented in the UN. It could have been under the Republic of China. Double 10 is the nationalist holiday. That's October the 10th, 10th month, 10th day, double 10. And on double 10, for years and years, just like under the Japanese, they would round up all the school kids and land those who, and you had to be at the square to pay your respects to the god when he appeared on the balcony. I was there, and I actually took this picture. And if you look very carefully, you can see the Jibo, Generalissimo Junkin, there, and the madam there. And this is Emperor Bokassa, who I almost tripped over. Funny story, I'll tell it later if you want to hear it, but why I was up there. Chiang Kai-shek died on April the 5th, 1975. And of course, they had like a state funeral in Taiwan. Then they erected this memorial to him in Taipei. If you visit Taipei, be sure and go to see this memorial because it's only one of several beautiful Chinese buildings in that whole big complex in the heart of the capital. And erected this Lincoln-esque kind of place where people should come and pay their respects to this great leader. Well, we'll tell you about that later. The vice president, Yan Cha-ken, succeeded him temporarily for 3 years, 75 to 78, but then the real heir to the throne, Zhang's son, Zhang Jingguo, became the president for 10 years, 1978 to 1988. He did institute some reforms to his credit, and he did lift martial law finally in 1987. But this thing, 1987, they still were under martial law. And in Taipei and other big cities, you could pass these huge garrisons of with tanks and everything you would use, not just to defend the island against the communist invasion, but to keep the Taiwanese people down. What was going on in terms of the Presbyterian Church during this time? Well, it had continued to grow phenomenally. The Lord blessed, and by this time there were almost 200,000 Presbyterian Christians in Taiwan. So they were a well-educated. Most of the doctors and lawyers in Taiwan were Presbyterian Christians, because the Japanese would only allow, while they controlled Taiwan, graduate studies in those two fields, nothing else. Because, you know, they had taken over education and everything, just like the nationalists did too. If you were a Taiwanese, you couldn't be a teacher, only a Guashenglang, the mainlanders, but they were known, the Chinese mainlanders could be teachers. But the church put out a statement in 1971, a statement of our national faith. As I said, the government from the beginning, when they arrived, saw the Taiwan Presbyterian Church as a kind of a natural enemy. 200,000 strong, highly educated, biggest group organized on the whole island. So from the beginning, there was this conflict between the church, mostly all Taiwanese and some Aboriginals, very few mainlander Chinese going on. So in 1971, they put out that appeal. Oh, I should have said, put me back up. Statement of our national fate, and it called for self-determination for the Chinese, but for the Taiwanese people in Taiwan, which was a very brave thing to do. I was involved in that. No, I'm going to go into that, but anyway. And then in 1975, they put out a second statement, our appeal by the Presbyterian Church in Taiwan concerning the Bible, the church, and the nation, and they called for human rights and the end of the isolation of Taiwan, the Republic of China. And then a third statement was put out in 1977, a declaration on human rights by the Presbyterian Church in Taiwan, which called for independence for Taiwan, which was a really, really courageous stand to take at that time. Well, of course, there were consequences. When I was there, for example, the police would come to the church office at least once a week, search all the files, interrogate all the secretaries, trying to find anything they could about Gao Chongmen, C.N. Gao, our general secretary, who was the most godly, humble, kind, courageous man on the face of the earth. And so they could somehow maybe arrest him without too much of an uproar. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But in 1978, the U.S. recognized under Jimmy Carter the People's Republic of China. So that, of course, raised further alarm bells in Taiwan, because what's going to happen to us? In 1979, there was what became known as the Kaohsiung incident. In Kaohsiung, the city in the south of Taiwan, a peaceful demonstration for Human Rights Day had been organized. By this time, the Taiwanese were demonstrating in the streets about, you know, they wanted self-determination and they wanted their human rights and so on. And the police surrounded this big gathering, 1,000 people, and they kept moving in and in until they were crushing the people. And so, you know, scuffles broke out in that. And then they fired and they put tear gas on, and they accused the demonstrators of having caused a riot. And so they arrested the leaders, one of whom was Shirmingda, but he escaped and fled to the home of a Presbyterian elder. The Presbyterian elder called C.M. Gao, the general secretary, and said, what shall we do? Shall we continue to hide this guy or what? You know, it's dangerous. He said, what would Jesus do? He would reach out to the suffering and keep this man. You know. Well, eventually they found out where he was, and then they traced that call to C.M. Gao and they arrested him. Here you can see in the middle, this Shirmingda is right in the middle. And he knew there were many Presbyterians involved in these demonstrations and so on. And this is what he looks like today that, well, and I shouldn't say this, the years later when they had a reunion with CM Cao, who's on the right, Shermenga's on the left, and there's a Presbyterian pastor in the middle of. And so they sentenced him to 7 years in prison, of which he served 4.5 before enough pressure was put on the regime under Jiang Qingpo to have him released. But during that time, the General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church courageously continued him as General Secretary all the time he was in prison. And then, of course, he was released eventually. And I had been banned from Taiwan for 19 years, and we had a wonderful reunion in Taiwan later. Then Li Tenghui became the first Taiwanese to be elected the president of Taiwan in 1988. And he was reelected, so he was president for 12 years, a 6-year term. And he was an agricultural specialist that Jiang Qingpo, Chiang Kai-shek's son, had enlisted to be in the government because he had such a good sense of agriculture in Taiwan. Well, eventually he thought, hey, this is a pretty good guy, and he's Taiwanese, so maybe that'll please, the people a little bit. So he named him as his successor. Well, little did he know what was going to happen, because in 12 years, this man, who was a Presbyterian elder, led Taiwan step by step in a revolution without any violence into becoming a free democratic society with human rights. He just slowly got the gears of government, and he had to oust the military. He had to oust the corrupt system of electing the president by the National Assembly, who was made up of only KMT, Kuomintang, Nationalist Party people, and some of whom were so old they were living in the States, and they would fly them in a plane on stretchers to come to Taipei to vote for the president. Right? And the facade was they were still representing all those provinces in China where they had been elected 50 years before, that kind of thing. So when you consider what this man did, slowly to disarm the military in that sense, and the secret police and everything else. And then he made a public apology for the Chichipat or February 1947 incident where 20 to 30,000 had been massacred by the KMT. And there now you can see this peace symbol in a park dedicated to the memory of these people in Taipei. And there's a museum there that has the statements of the Presbyterian Church. This is not a Presbyterian thing, it's the government thing that shows the first courageous steps taken by the church and on behalf of the Taiwanese people. Until his dying day, he kept being involved in the political issues for self-determination, independence, and all of that in Taiwan. He died just a few years ago. But it reminds me of the story of Bishop Tutu from South Africa was being interviewed on television by a woman one day. I happened to see it. And this was years ago. And he had his collar on and his garb and so on. And finally she said to him, Bishop, what is a man of the cloth being involved in the political things in South Africa? He said, Madam, the only thing that is secular is sin. All the rest belongs to God, and he wants us to help him redeem it. That's the best one-line statement I've ever heard of what our theology of the kingdom of God is all about. The only thing that is secular is sin. All the rest belongs to God. He wants us to be involved in redeeming it. Well, that's CM Cao in Taiwan. Chen Shui-bian got elected in 2000 as his successor and was president for, by that time it was 4 years each for 2 terms in 2008. They had formed a Democratic Progressive Party, the DPP, which eventually defeated the KMT, the Kuomintang, the nationalists. And in 2000 was the first time that the Taiwanese actually took over the presidency. They said the Congress, well, the UN they called it. They still didn't have a majority in there. But you can see there's CM Gao on the left and Chen Shui-bian in the middle, and a Presbyterian pastor on the right involved in the campaign and all of that. So, and when he was elected, congratulations, and so on. So here you had the General Secretary of the Presbyterian Church and the whole church involved in this campaign to bring about some kind of human rights in Taiwan. I had the privilege of meeting the president then and presenting him a historic Taiwanese English dictionary that I happen to have. As I said before, you'll notice now on the stamps, it says Republic of China, Taiwan. He started to push the whole idea of Taiwan becoming being a nation in its own right, which they're saying Republic of China is still a nation. It's never been declared not a nation. So we're already a nation, they're saying, but we want to be called Taiwan eventually, that kind of thing. We want to have de jure, not just de facto recognition. He renamed this whole memorial park complex to Chiang Kai-shek as Freedom Square. I mean, this wasn't only him. Obviously, he had to get this through different judicatories and so on. But under his administration, I should say, these changes were made. The Chiang Kai-shek Memorial Airport became the Taoyuan Airport, Memorial Chiang Kai-shek Airport. And in 2000, during that period also, you can see here is William Lowe, who succeeded CM Gao as the General Secretary of the Presbyterian Church of Taiwan. And they had a big campaign to try to get the Republic of China, Taiwan back into the UN, but they didn't succeed. In 2007, Chiang Kai-shek's statues were removed, and there's a movement underway right now to even take him out of that memorial hall. There were 40,000 statues of Chiang Kai-shek on Taiwan during his reign. And there's a park where they put a whole bunch of them together. And now they're talking about getting rid of the whole shebang. So, it's very interesting because people in the Republic of China or even Russia, for example, they can't get rid of Stalin. Russia can't, and the People's Republic can't get rid of Mao either. He's still on the gate over the Forbidden City in Beijing and on the banknotes and so on. He killed 70 million people, I mean, through his terrible policies and whatever. Stalin killed how many zillions? But they can't get rid of these people. Well, on Taiwan, they said, we are not going to keep this person. So of course, there are mainlanders who came with the nationalists, the old people, the young people, you'll see later, are in favor of getting rid of these things. Then the nationalists made a comeback, Kuomintang Party in 2008, and Ma Jingyo became president again became president for 8 years. And he met with Xi Jinping, I believe in Hong Kong. And they made an agreement, which of course, nobody consulted the Taiwanese people. These were mainlanders again, making these agreements that the Taiwanese could not influence. And they were very afraid that there would be an accommodation and he would promise, yeah, Taiwan can go back to China So there they agreed there would be this formula that they had for Hong Kong, one country, two systems. Well, we'll see next week how that works. And so, or how it didn't work for Hong Kong. So that was the aim, but as you can see, there was a rebellion, especially amongst the Taiwanese young people. They actually took over the legislature and forced Ma Jinyo to back down and not make any agreement with China. Then the DPP made a big comeback in 2018. Tsai Ing-wen became president. She was a DDP, Democratic Party candidate, and again, highly supported by the Presbyterian Church. And when you look at Taiwan, from when I first got there, and you had to drive on the roads around all this stuff because the farmers used the roads. What? Oh, 1969. This is what it looked like. And now this is what it looks like today. Taipei, the capital. The 101 building, which was the tallest in the world for a few years. The Grand Hotel in Taipei, you can stay there if you have enough money, and so on. So the country is under the becoming a democratic, free place, is at a tremendous growth and development, not only politically and socially, but also economically. Spiritually, the church, under persecution, made it through, grew stronger, kept growing. And until now, today, there are 27 presbyteries in Taiwan. There are 1,233 churches. This was the church we attended while we were there, actually. And there are 258,000 members of the Presbyterian Church in Taiwan. It has 4 universities. It has 3 hospitals. Sam Nordhoff, you probably remember that name. He was very instrumental in helping to develop the medical ministry of the Taiwan Presbyterian Church. And this is Mackay Memorial Hospital today, just part of it. They have several in other places. This is the hospital in Kaohsiung that was started by Maxwell, what it looks like today. They had 2 seminaries, one in the south, Tainan Seminary, and then one in the north, Taiwan Theological Seminary. And they had 2 Bible colleges, one in Hsinchu, Presbyterian Bible College, and one in Hualien. And they have these 3 high schools, large, one for girls, one for boys, and one Tamkang high school for boys and girls. In 2015, they celebrated their 150th anniversary, and we were invited back to be part of it. This is only showing half of the crowd, that because it was early, in a big stadium in Taipei. And there were other events on the same day filling up stadiums throughout the country. But this is what this was the choir. You remember, like a Billy Graham type choir at the front. And C.M. Gao and his wife Ruth, who also was involved in politics, his wife, she ran for the National Assembly, were still alive and still there. And our RCA missionary group, who had been invited back, Bagley Koolhaas and Judy Estelle and the Roland and Judy Van Ness and us, and then the area secretary. Well, in 2024, people thought, well, maybe the DPP was going to lose the election. The economy had faltered a little bit and so on. And but then China kind of colonized Hong Kong. And that was the 2 one country, two systems formula that the mainland had advocated for Taiwan. And the Taiwanese people took one look at that and said, not for us. And they overwhelmingly elected William Lai and Xiao Kim as the next president and vice president of Taiwan. Here you see Taiwanese church people blessing her. She was the daughter of the president of Tainan Seminary, who I knew very, very well. And I knew this little girl when she was 2 years old. Now she's vice president of Taiwan. Today in Taiwan, you're free to demonstrate. You're free to be who you are. And you can see by this family, it's kind of representative of what you see in today in Taiwan is a free democratic society that values life, the life of every person on the island. So why should Taiwan be an independent nation? Well, you say that's taking a stand. Well, yeah, that's where I am. Beginning with the Aboriginals, as I said before, the people of Formosa, or Taiwan, has steadfastly resisted being taken over by another power. 12 rebellions in 300 years. Taiwan's 16 Aboriginal tribes are not Chinese, as stated by Richard Nixon's Shanghai communique and Xi Jinping's recent speeches. He made that speech that all Chinese on both sides of the harbor, of course, are in favor of us uniting and so on. These Aboriginals stood up and said, who's talking about us? We're not Chinese. And we were here first. 3, even when the Qing dynasty declared Taiwan a province of China in 1887, it only controlled 1/3 of the island and then ceded it to Japan in perpetuity only 8 years later. In 2023, a Pew poll said only 3% of Taiwan's 23 million people identify themselves as primarily Chinese, while 85% said they have no emotional ties with China. Here it is. So you have the total at the top, and then you've got age groups. Look at that. Because, of course, even the mainlander kids now been born and raised in Taiwan and so on, they're not harking back to the old village in the mainland. They're saying, oh, we're Taiwanese. We were born here, we lived there, and so on. So ages 18 to 14, 83% primarily Taiwanese. Only 1% primarily Chinese. 35 plus 61 and 33. But at the bottom, not emotionally attached to China, 85%. And only again 1% attached emotionally to China. The old people still want to go back to the village and get buried next to their parents. That's about what it boils down to. So this is number 5 in 2023. Taiwanese public opinion poll, only 11% of the population favored unification with China, while 43.9% favored independence and 25.6.9% the maintenance of the status quo. In the 1951 peace treaty signed with Japan, the status of Taiwan was left undetermined. Did you know that? Till this day, that status of that island has never been determined. Taiwan's people should determine their own future and be granted the same choice that transformed so many other colonial possessions into modern states. And number 7, neither Mao or Chiang's identified Taiwan as one of China's lost territories until the Cairo conference. That was pretty late in the game, I'd say. Number 8, Taiwan's presidents have declared on numerous occasions that the island is the de facto independent Republic of China. Number 9, 12 countries still recognize the Republic of China, Taiwan as a country in its own right. number. Oh, oh, I'm sorry. This confuses me because the way they got this set up. Now we're on number 5. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so I need to read those? You heard me read them, so. Okay. Number 10, Taiwan is the 16th largest trading country in the world with over 800 billion people, a billion in trade. Taiwan is rated the 14th richest country in the world out of a list of 193 countries. Taiwan ranks 61st among the nations of the world in terms of population, higher than 2/3 of the countries in the UN. Taiwan has the best universal healthcare system in the world. Taiwan has the lowest poverty rate in the world. Taiwan has the highest recycling rate in the world. That should teach us something, right? You know that Grand Rapids, I heard, does not do recycling anymore. Yeah. 16, Taiwan produces the highest number of microchips in the world, which is one of the reasons China would like to get its hands on Taiwan. Taiwan is larger than 110 other countries in the world, around the size of the Netherlands. Taiwan ranks the 10th highest in the world in the Democracy Index. Historically, culturally, racially, politically, religiously, and geographically, Taiwan is as distinct from China as the United Kingdom is from the European continent. When you think about it, you know, how wide is the English Channel? Anybody know? What? Oh, 24 miles? So how far is Taiwan from China? Do you remember? 90 miles, yeah. And England has developed as a totally different kind of society than France or Germany or any other country. So the Taiwanese are saying, look, we're not just a reproduction of China. In fact, when the KMT came under Chiang Kai-shek, they tried to reenact the mainland on Taiwan. They built something to look like the Temple of Heaven. They built other things to look like other buildings in China, and as I said, forbid Taiwanese and force Mandarin to be spoken by everybody in schools and so on. Number 20, the people of Taiwan have observed China's failure to implement its one country, two systems formula in Hong Kong. Hong Kong, and we'll see next week, has now been colonized all over again. So you see a lot of these demonstrations show that the figures in these polls are reality. Now, what has been the United States position vis-a-vis Taiwan? Franklin Roosevelt. In 43, he got Chiang Kai-shek to support national self-determination for those nations the Allies would liberate from Japanese domination in the Cairo Declaration. Well, why not Taiwan? In 45, he ordered leaflets to be dropped over Taiwan, promising that if the Taiwanese would oppose the Japanese on their island, they would be able to determine its future on the basis of self-determination. You know how those things go. Nixon. 72, during Richard, I was 90 miles away from this on Taiwan when he went there. The only thing that appeared in our papers or magazines was Richard Nixon went to China and is in Shanghai. That's all. The Time magazine, Newsweek, anything, everything was ripped out. My copies, you know, or blacked out, or anything about Mao ever, or the mainland was always censored, as was your phone and your mail and everything. So in 72, during Nixon's visit to China, the U.S. formally acknowledged that all Chinese on either side of the Taiwan Strait maintained there is but one China. Well, now what a statement that was. Did anybody ask the people on Taiwan? Never. I mean, all they're asking is saying, look, China, if people vote to reunite with you tomorrow, fine, we'll do it. But give us the chance to decide what we want for our own place. Yeah, we'll get questions in that. The use of the word acknowledge rather than accept was deliberate. in that it left the U.S. position ambiguous regarding the future of Taiwan. It also stated that this question should be resolved peacefully. Well, that has been our stance ever since, ambiguity. So now, of course, it's extremely ambiguous in terms of on Tuesday it might be this, and on Wednesday it might be that. You know, so the Taiwanese are looking at what is this new thing going on in the States, and will we support them or won't we? Japan has said they will. Australia has said they will. And then, of course, Carter recognized the PRC and broke diplomatic relations with Taiwan. The Congress responded by passing the Taiwan Relations Act, which maintained commercial, cultural, and other relations through the American Institute in Taiwan, except for an embassy, without official government representation and without formal diplomatic relations. The TRA also provides a congressional role in determining security assistance necessary to enable Taiwan to maintain a sufficient self-defense capability. It also stipulates that the future of Taiwan will be determined by peaceful means. It also specifies that it is U.S. policy to consider any non-peaceful means to determine Taiwan's future a threat to the peace and security of the Western Pacific and of grave concern to the United States, and to maintain the capacity of the United States to resist any resort to force or other forms of coercion, jeopardizing the security or social or economic system of Taiwan's people. In 1982, now declassified cables from the State Department to the Taiwan government detailed 6 assurances. First, the United States has not agreed to set a date for ending arms sales to Taiwan. Second, the United States has not agreed to consult with the PRC on arms sales to Taiwan. Third, the United States will not play a mediation role between Taipei and Beijing. 4, the United States has not agreed to revise the Taiwan Relations Act. 5, the United States has not altered its position regarding sovereignty over Taiwan. 6, the United States will not exert pressure on Taiwan to enter into negotiations with the PRC. Well, enter Slick Willie, Bill Clinton. He went to China and paid a substantial price because he wanted to be on public television in China and speak to the Chinese people. So to do that, he did this. His public acceptance, the first by an American president of Beijing's position on the status of Taiwan. Clinton declared 3 no's as official U.S. policy. No support for 2 Chinas, no independence for Taiwan, no membership of Taiwan in any international organization of sovereign nations. This was a major and quite dangerous statement and change in official American policy, which for 26 years had held open the right of self-determination for the people of Taiwan by carefully avoiding any American statement as to whether the island was or should be nothing more than a province of China. Then Joe Biden, 2022, Congress passed the Taiwan Policy Act, promoting the security of Taiwan, stability in the region, and deterrence of the People's Republic of China's aggression against Taiwan, which, you know, you all watch the news, you know what's going on. They keep flying around and sending ships around and threatening. It also threatened severe sanctions against the PRC for hostile action against Taiwan. In 2024, President Joe Biden stated on several occasions that the USA would come to the defense of Taiwan should it be attacked by the PRC. In 2025, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, who I hope knows what he's doing, said that if China were to attack Taiwan, the U.S. would defend Taiwan. But as I said, with the political situation we're in today, you can't know what's going to happen tomorrow, this week. So how can the goal of China and Taiwan coexisting as peaceful and friendly neighboring states be achieved? China's military, economic, and political pressure will not lead to peace and stability in the region. It needs to accept that a move toward acceptance of Taiwan as a friendly neighbor state is in its own best interest in the long run. It should agree to support a referendum that would allow the Taiwanese people to determine their own future, to either vote for independence or to unite with the People's Republic of China. The United States' 75-year-old policy of ambiguity and the acquiescence by the UN and many countries to China's veto of Taiwan as a legitimate country have outlived reality. It's time to recognize the Republic of China on Taiwan as a de jure country. 3, Taiwan has made good progress in dealing with its dark KMT past, carrying out democratic reforms, uniting its diverse population, revising its governmental and constitutional structure, and developing its self-defense. 4, Taiwan should be readmitted to the United Nations as a country in its own right, given access to international bodies, and be able to establish diplomatic relations with other countries. And here's what our dear Taiwanese friends look like today. Dai Chi. Have you ever do Dai Chi? And look at the little girl holding up her peace symbol. Retrospect and prospect. You see, the retrospect has a lot to do with informing us about the prospect today in Taiwan. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes, and Wendell, thank you for this overview of the history of Taiwan and right up into the present moment. The immediate question that comes to my mind is, why do the Taiwanese want to be known as a Republic of China, Taiwan? Why would China be in the title of their country then if they want to be their own independent nation? I don't get it.
Because de facto, they can use that as a way to say we are already an independent country. You see, because they're not PRC, they're not the People's Republic of China. They are the continuation, you might say, of the Republic of China, which was a country in its own right in the past. And so the next move would, of course, be to drop the ROC and say we're independent as Taiwan. But they can't do that now. I mean, it would, they have to maintain this de facto recognition that they can say, well, we're already an independent country without declaring independence. China has said time and time again, if they declare independence, we're going to attack. So if they do that, they're for sure going to be invaded. And so I think they're just waiting until the things are okay for them to take the final step of declaring independence. And that would be then de jure. They would be recognized by law, international law, which would be a final resolution of the 1945 peace agreement with Japan, because the state of Taiwan is still not settled according to that. So it's the difference between de facto recognizing we can't declare independence is like declaring war on China. So we have to keep this, but you see they added in brackets Taiwan. So that's where they want to go in terms of independence, but and become de jure internationally recognized. I don't know if that muddied the waters, but it's complicated.
Thank you very much. Highly informative for a current worldview situation that I'm sure most of us had no appreciation for historic roots. So that was very helpful. My question is, for the majority of pictures that you showed and addressed as family pictures, it was virtually all women. Is there something to that?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the last part.
When you referred to families and showed family pictures,
Oh,
it involved dominantly women. I didn't recall seeing any men in any of the family pictures.
oh, well, that was accidental. Yeah, there are, that just happened to be that way. I didn't notice that.
Wendell, I know that each year the Seventh Fleet engages, let's put that way, in exercises with the Taiwanese Navy. And the People's Republic of China, their military sees that as quite provocative. Do you think there's been any cooling in that perspective, or have we just taken it up a couple of levels?
Well, it's very, you know, the Straits of Taiwan are extremely important in terms of international shipping, just like in the Middle East with yeah, and the Straits of Hormuz. So the U.S. and its allies want to say to the Chinese, look, this is an international artery, major shipping route for everyone. So the Chinese have aggressively continued to say, we own everything. You know, most nations, it's 250 miles offshore is China, the East China Sea, the South China Sea, the Straits of Taiwan. They're saying that all is ours, including all the oil and under the little islands and so on. They're all contested by Japan, Taiwan, Vietnam, everybody else. So it's important for them to send a message to China. We are not recognizing that your claims to have all this. It has to go through the international arbitration and the normal channels of making international decisions. So it's not, I don't think, a provocation, it's just a declaration.
How was it that Chiang Kai-shek seemed to have a good reputation here in the States as one who was opposed to communism, when in reality he was, you know, just as you described him? How do we miss the other part of that?
Madam, have you ever heard of Madam Chiang Kai-shek? She was his billboard in America, and there was a China lobby made up of one former famous missionary doctor and Henry Luce, the owner of Time magazine, his wife, and Claire Chennault, the head of the Flying Tigers, and some very influential people. But the madam would come periodically and even stay at the White House. And Roosevelt about had a connection, but politically he couldn't do anything about it. And she wowed the United States. I mean, she had her education at Wellesley College and spoke impeccable English and could deliver these wonderful speeches with all of this righteousness and Christian jargon and all of that. And we just swallowed the whole bit. My wife and I, when we went to Taiwan with our three little ones in 1969, we didn't know any better. When we got there and started relating to the Presbyterian Church and started digging under the surface, we discovered all of this stuff going on. It was not free China at all. And they were not, he had 4 wives to start with. Did you know that, Chiang Kai-shek? Yeah. And the last one he married was 13 years, no, the one before the last, before the madam. There were 3 big families in China, and he wanted to marry Madam Chiang Kai-shek because of all the influence and wealth and everything. But I was saying before that, what was I saying? He married a 13-year-old girl in a big ceremony in Shanghai in the Peace Hotel. And then he maneuvered to marry Madam Chiang Kai-shek. Well, her father was an ardent Christian businessman, big businessman, Charlie Soong. And he had his education in the States and some Bible training and all that. Her mother was a very devout Christian. And when she said, well, Chiang Kai-shek wants to marry me, wouldn't that be great? We'd be politically, and she said, he has to be a Christian. Oh, so the next day he came, he said, okay, just baptize me. And a 13-year-old girl in the States, who now was over 16, 17, he said, oh no, he had never married her, and she was just his concubine. And she came out with a book later detailing the whole story about that. It was suppressed by John Jinguo, his son, and never made it into publication.
Another question. does does United States have any bases on Taiwan?
It used to, but not anymore. No, it used to have the MAG group, Military Assistance Group. When we were there, that there was an air base in Taichung, a big one, and also facilities in Taipei and other places. But after we recognized the PRC, we withdrew those forces. But we'd still, as I said, the Congress still ensure that we will supply defensive military equipment and that we will have a de facto embassy in Taiwan under the name of the organization. And they have one in New York. I think it's in New York.
Well, yes, Wendell, I want you to expand a little bit more on what you just said, because the debate in the United States is what is the Trump administration's position if the Taiwanese want to move to declare their independence, which they're afraid to do, as you've said. Is this sovereignty zone that Trump seems to want to acknowledge the Chinese are going to have their sovereignty over a certain part of the globe and others are going to have sovereignty over different parts of the globe? Or are we really going to fulfill what Pete Hegseth said last year? We are for the defense of Taiwan. Say what you really believe might be in the future for the United States and Taiwanese independence.
That's like looking into a crystal ball, because what's true today will be not true tomorrow. I mean, you can't rely, in my view, on anything the administration says out loud today. Look at the tariffs. I mean, again, it's been postponed until August the 1st and so on. So this is very disquieting for the Taiwanese. And I'm sure, I think Trump thinks that being such an enigma, you might say, to read, that it will be a deterrence to China to take some kind of a rash step. So that may be so. But what does he really think, and who could know at this point? I think it seems as though we will continue to support Taiwan defensively. But if it were attacked, would we join in opposing it? I think that's a question that Taiwanese are very nervous about, the answer. And if he said something tomorrow, we will for sure do it. Who can tell that next week he will say, no, the arms to Ukraine, for example. He said, no, we're not going to send any more to Ukraine, and people are getting killed by the. And now he's saying the next week, oh yeah, now we're going to do it. So, I mean, it's total chaos. I couldn't possibly read his mind of what's left of the nation.
Quick summary. Why couldn't you go there for 19 years?
Quick summary.
Quick summary. You've got 3 minutes.
I spoke Taiwanese. I was the coordinator for university student work for Taiwan Presbyterian Church. I was very much involved with the leadership of the church, C.M. Gao and other people. And I would clandestinely report at the U.S. Embassy because they had several lower officials, not the ambassador, Makani, he had his head in the sand, but the lower officials, they wanted to know what's going on in the Taiwanese world. And so I could help them with that. But I don't think they ever found out about that. But anyway, then funneling funds to political prisoners, a Presbyterian family. The nationalist government's summer program for young people was called the Kyukenko, Salvation of the Nation, was a replica of the Hitler Youth Camp. It was political indoctrination. So we planned about 7 different programs for university students and Taiwan seminary students to give them an alternative in different places. Yeah. And So like Taiwan seminary students came to work in factories in Taipei. So they could really find out what it was like to be a factory worker and what they were thinking and so on. Others went to the farms and lived with farm people and so on. How do you reach out to these people in terms of the Christian gospel or understand them or so on? Well, the one in Taipei, I got a call 11 o'clock at night. The police had come and arrested all of our students living in a hostel, saying that they were disturbing the neighborhood and gambling and I mean a bunch of baloney. Well, I could not go down there. It would have made it worse to the prison. So my colleague, Jahibian, I called him, he went. He did succeed in getting them out, but they said the program is done. So, I mean, you know, and other things. So you add it all together. I was also accused of being part of helping Piang Min escape from Taiwan. He escaped in February. I got there in January. Some of our people were involved in that, but I was not. So they were wrong on that. But and then Mike and Judith Thornberry, they were expelled from the island, and we had done a project with them. And from the seminary campus where he was teaching all the way to the airport was lined with soldiers. And the only way that anybody knew they were being expelled was their little daughter used to play with some other daughter on the campus, and they put a message inside of some gum and talked their guards into letting her go there. And then they found out that they were being expelled from Taiwan. So we knew about it. But then I also, when the president of Tainan Seminary, Dan Beebe, I don't know if you know that name, he was being, and his wife expelled. And at that time, Nixon was in China. So I knew that all the reporters were coming to Taiwan to see what the reaction in Taiwan would be to that. And so I thought Roland Van Ness was teaching in the South in Tainan Seminary, and I was in the North, but we had a postcard code system using his Old Testament to send messages. And he had sent me a message that Bibi was going to be on the train with the police coming to Taipei to be expelled. So I glued together a message and slipped it under the doors of all these reporters in the big hotel, and had my little girl with me and reserved a room to have a tea in the one big hotel for this. Just for had to have a tea. I had some friends come, but I'd be out of town, so I paid them in advance. Well, all these reporters showed up, and Dan Beebe asked the chief of police who was with him on the train, I've got some friends, you know, I'd really like to say goodbye to them. Could I just stop by this hotel on the way to the airport? He said, yeah, okay. So they walk into this room, and here are 15 reporters from the New York Times and all over the world. And Beebe explains to them what's going on. He's being kicked out of Taiwan. Well, you know, my thought was, Nolan and mine, we can't just let this go. People have to know, and all of us are going to be kicked out eventually if they don't pay any price for it. I don't think they ever knew I did that, but who knows?
Thank you. We have come to the end of our time together, but we'll be back here next Wednesday morning. So are you available if anybody wants to
Yeah,
have
sure.
just one-on-one?
If you want to read about some of my involvement or some of the history that you talked about and so on, I do have a book called The Church Under the Cross, Mission in Asia and Times of Turmoil, Volume 1 on Taiwan. So if you'd like to have it, I think you can.
Yeah, we will send an email after the course is done so that you can contact Wendell directly in the event that you would be interested in any of these books. We as HASP cannot permit any of our presenters to sell books. So we'll find a way to make sure that you're aware of how you can purchase one from Wendell. Okay.
I have 2 minutes yet to read this.
Oh, sure. All right.
Official Declaration of Independence of the Republic of Formosa. The Japanese have affronted China by annexing our territory of Formosa, and the supplications of us, the people of Formosa, at the portals of the throne, that is China, have been made in vain. We now learn that the Japanese slaves are about to arrive. If we suffer this, the land of our hearths and homes will become the land of savages and barbarians. But if we do not suffer it, our condition of comparative weakness will certainly not endure long. Frequent conferences have been held with the foreign powers who all avert that the people of Formosa must establish their independence before the powers will assist them. Now, therefore, we, the people of Formosa, are irrevocably resolved to die before we will serve the enemy. And we have in council determined to convert the whole island of Formosa into a republican state, and that the administration of all our state affairs should be organized and carried on by the deliberations and decisions of officers publicly elected by us, the people. But as in this new enterprise, there is needed as well for the resistance of Japanese aggression as for the organization of the new administration, a man to have chief control in whom authority shall center, and by whom the peace of our homestead shall be assured. Therefore, in view of the respect and admiration which we have long held the governor and commander-in-chief, Dong Ching Sung, we have in council determined to raise him to the position of President of the Republic. An official seal has been cut, and on the second day of 5th moon at the Sioux hour, 9 a.m., 25th May, it will be publicly presented with all respect by the notables and people of the whole of Formosa. At early dawn on that day, all of us, notables and people, farmers and merchants, artisans and tradesmen, must assemble at the Wanfang meeting house that we may in grave and solemn manner inaugurate this undertaking. Let there be neither delay nor mistake. A declaration of the whole of Formosa, an announcement by the whole of Formosa, and the seal. 1895.
Thank you.
Yeah.
See you all next week.
Okay.
Best meeting. High school was Martin. We had no war. We're pretty informative.
Yeah. Oh,